forgive me. If I had a nickel for every time Liam Lawson replaced a driver who broke his wrist at the Dutch Grand Prix, I'd have 2 nickels. Which of course isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Rest. Kia ora, I'm Kimmy, and before I get into answering some questions I've seen around the place about this recent Red Bull shuffle, let's talk about something that some of you might see as petty. The perpetual misrepresentation of Daniel Ricciardo's 2023 injury. This is a hand. This is a wrist. Now they are connected, but they are not the same body part, just as your cheekbone isn't your jaw and your kneecap isn't your shin. It's time to look away if you're a little bit squeamish. In 2023, Daniel Ricciardo broke the 5th metacarpal in his left hand, which is the bone that connects onto your little finger. Okay, you can open your eyes now. He notably did not break his wrist. However, as all of the jokes today have reminded me, there is this kind of perpetual belief that he broke his wrist. And look, I spent a lot of time looking at the word wrist to make that compilation. It's really one of those words that looks weirder and weirder the more you stare at it, but that's beside the point. The point is that even people I consider to be relatively respectable motorsport journalists constantly make this mistake. And it's not just today, it's something that you see mentioned casually and on a regular basis whenever the subject of Daniel Ricciardo comes up. I've even seen it mentioned incorrectly on the official broadcast. And I know it might not seem like a big deal, but it's a widely publicised moment that has become a ubiquitous touchpoint in Formula One conversations, and yet even those tasked with reporting on the sport don't know the simple detail of what exactly Daniel broke. And in my opinion, that's right up there with unironically talking about drivers shedding weight to make the car go faster, despite the minimum weight limit being a thing since 2019. It's something that's just factually incorrect that I would expect anyone with any sort of credibility to get right. And while scrolling social media platforms to gank all of those images for that overly long intro that'll hopefully get me an extra ad roll in this video, something became starkly apparent. The vast majority of people making the 2023 parallel to the news that broke yesterday state that Daniel broke his wrist. Only a handful actually mentioned his hand, which in some cases is probably for the bit, but it's a really great example of how misinformation can spread and become a widely held truth. Sports fanon, if you will. And no, this specific example might not seem of consequence, but think of all the other things that you've heard about drivers, or for that matter, any public figure in the past that have been repeated and parroted all over the internet. If something as easy to fact check as a widely publicised and photographed injury can fall victim to the Mandela effect, then how many other things are considered universal truths that are actually just wrong? Misremembering or mistellings, perhaps a passing comment in an interview that was intended to be taken as ironic, something to just sit on and think about, particularly if it drives negative attitudes and ongoing abuse towards specific drivers. I'm sorry, that got kind of heavy, so let's talk about what is actually happening. For those living under a rock, the TLDR of it is that according to Red Bull, Isack Hadjar injured his wrist over the summer break. Please don't make jokes in the comments. And Red Bull has made the decision to move Liam Lawson into the empty Red Bull racing seat and place Yuki Tsunoda in the Racing Bulls. The top question I've seen here is this: why is Yuki not going straight into the Red Bull? Why not just leave Liam where he is? He's doing really well, and Yuki is Red Bull's official reserve after all. Now, I do understand the logic of that question. Yuki has been embedded in the team all season. He's the most recent driver to be alongside Max Verstappen, and he has more Formula One experience than Liam does. And of course, the elephant in the room, which is that no Red Bull driver has ever returned to a Red Bull Racing seat after being dropped or demoted. And no, Christian Klein and his seat-sharing arrangement with Antonio Liuzzi back in 2005 does not count. But if you think a little bit deeper, which thankfully due to my need for sleep after this news broke last night, I've had time to do, putting Lawson back in the seat makes total sense. The new generation of cars has very different driving requirements than the last one. It's much more complicated with the energy management, and it requires a certain amount of finesse and practice to get into the habit of. Yuki's probably had plenty of time in the sim, but he hasn't driven one of these in a competitive session or even in free practice, as he's not eligible to participate in those. And while these teams do operate independently from a sporting perspective, Red Bull contracts, apart from Max Verstappen's of course, cover driving for whichever team they are told to drive for. They're not specific to one or the other, just wherever they're needed to go. Red Bull Racing understandably is likely to be the priority for the parent company when it comes to their placing in the Constructors' Championship come the end of the year. It makes sense to put the driver who's the most familiar with the style of racing that comes with these new regulations in that cockpit, rather than take a punt on someone who realistically is an unknown. Not because of past performance, but because these are completely new cars and this is a sprint weekend with, you know, one practice session and it's probably gonna rain. So like, you get my point. Now, when I posted about this on Blue Sky, somebody replied with the question of why not bring in Iwasa as there's no super formula this weekend. And the answer is kind of the same. You know, despite Yuki not having on-track experience with the new generation of car, he does still have a heck of a lot of experience racing in Formula One. It comes back once again to the Constructors' Championship and putting the drivers they believe will give them the best shot at the most points in the seats. The Constructors' Championship is not just a mark of glory and a box to tick, it's a way for a team to bank more money for the balance sheet at the end of the financial year. It's also often tied directly to team bonuses, and not just bigwigs and drivers, it's extremely common for teams to distribute these bonuses all the way down the chain. And with Racing Bulls only 5 points clear of Alpine, it stands to reason they want the driver they believe gives them the best chance of maintaining or possibly extending that lead, lest they risk being caught more easily by them before the end of the season and missing out on a heck of a lot of money, some of which may have been distributed to employees. Which is where I get on to the last question, which is what does this mean for Lawson and Tsunoda's futures? Well, I suppose on one side it does show that Red Bull has some kind of faith that Lawson can perform in the car, otherwise yeah, they probably would have skipped all of the shuffling and taken a punt on Tsunoda. But on the other hand, if he makes a mess of it, then despite his excellent performance and status as best of the rest up to this point in the season, it could reflect negatively when the time comes to finally put pen to paper and close the deals on their drivers for 2027. Red Bull might not lose Verstappen this year, but they're certainly likely to sometime in the near future. Planning for that moment means taking opportunities to find out information that informs their succession plan every chance they get. It's also a fantastic opportunity to showcase his skills to potential teams. There's still a few who haven't confirmed their complete lineups for next year, and if he can go out there on a sprint weekend with one practice when it's expected to be wet and do a good job, then surely someone will start to consider him seriously for a seat. It will also be a great way for Racing Bulls to ascertain exactly what level Lawson and Lindblad are at. If Tsunoda goes out there and smashes it out of the park and firmly beats Lindblad provided neither of their weekends are compromised, then it's probably a good indication that both Racing Bulls permanent drivers aren't performing at the ceiling of the car. Now, there's no official word yet about whether or not Isack will be back in Italy. There's a week break in between Zandvoort and Monza, so the expectation is that he'll have time to recover, and this is only a one-off. But if he does have to sit another one out, who knows? Maybe they'll see what Lindblad's like in the Red Bull to really get a sense of where they're at with their aforementioned succession planning. Either way, this is a fantastic opportunity for both Lawson and Tsunoda to put their names firmly in the conversation for 2027, even outside of the Red Bull garages. And for Lawson in particular, as a driver who's now in his 4th year without completing a full season in a single team, then a good showing will further demonstrate his adaptability. So what do you think about this temporary shuffle? Chat about it down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe even consider subscribing if you'd like to see more from me. Thanks as always to my patrons for your support. If you'd like to join, the link is in the description as well as right here on the screen. I now have to go and adjust the championship tracker spreadsheet, which is going to be fun. Anyway, ka kite. I'll catch you next time.